All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is Michael Dean. You're watching the Prince Podcast. And before we continue, please subscribe. Hit the subscribe button down below and check us out on Patreon. Patreon.com/podcastjuice. All right, with that, let's work it like a job. Peace.
Oh, but maybe this just isn't what I'm looking for. That could have happened. On the other hand, if it had really been something that I had heard the music and thought, man, you know, this just isn't where I'm at. You know, I would have given him everything that I could have given him, but it wouldn't necessarily have been something that I would have gone away and said, well, gee, you know, that was cool, that was session, but I don't know if this is a relationship that's really going to be worth my while, you know, going after. Fortunately, for everybody concerned, he seemed to be thrilled with what I did for him that day, and I had an awful lot of fun, and I genuinely liked those songs.
Okay.
You know, now, High Fashion and Mutiny were much more traditional R&B funk songs, so they were kind of more in my wheelhouse.
Okay.
Susanna's Pajamas was kind of like a fusion-y kind of little jazzy track, so it enabled me to just kind of do my thing. Desire was an interesting song because rhythmically, it's almost like a country and western song. It's like a Texas two-beat. It's a really odd song. But it had something to it that really just kind of captured my imagination. I said, this, you know, that's an odd song, but I really dug it. You know, it's very different. So I came away from that afternoon, you know, I mean, you know, it was about 2.5 hours. You know, we were done. So I came away with that just basically saying, that was fun. That was really cool. It was really interesting working with him. But it wasn't like I came away thinking like, oh my God, this is like, you know, this is God's gift to music.
Okay.
Because first of all, the totality of what Prince is as a musician, I'm not going to be able to get everything that he's about from just one recording session. You know, it would almost be insulting if I came away and said, oh my God, now I get it. No. There's so much more that he, you know, it was like he has so much to give as a musician that you're only going to really get an opportunity to understand everything that he can be about over a period of time.
Okay.
So I did that session, and my plan was I was just going to hang around for a few weeks in Minneapolis, spend time with Alan and my family. And then I was going to go back home to Atlanta because it was already understood that whatever was going to come of this project, this family album, it wasn't going to happen for a while. Purple Rain, the movie, was scheduled to be premiered in a month, and then soon after that, he was going to be going on tour with his band. So it was likely that this family album may not even see the light of day for another year. And I'm thinking, well, you know, this is rock and roll. A lot can happen in a year. He could lose interest in this whole thing, and that could be the end of it. So I'm not going to like sit here and get my hopes up as to whatever this is going to happen. I'm just going to take this a step at a time. So I was still hanging in Minneapolis, and about a week later, Prince apparently asked Alan, he said, is Eric still in town? And he said, yeah. He says, well, I've got another song for him to come in and play on. So I came back to the studio that day. This was about a week and a half after the first session, and he had Nothing Compares to You.
Wow.
Yeah. And so he did that, and I put the solo on that. And then there was another song we did a few days after that didn't end up on the album. It was just a straight up, really hardcore funk jam that was called Feline. And that's been out there in bootlegs, and it didn't end up on the album. It was just an outtake. It didn't make the final cut for the album, but it's been, you know, I'm sure all of the diehard Prince fans have a version of that somewhere. And then after that, he had his band in town because they were rehearsing for a short set that they were going to play at the premiere party in L.A. on the night that Purple Rain was premiered in L.A. There was an after party for that, and him and the band were going to do like a short 20-minute performance of a few songs. So he had the band with him at that time, and they were rehearsing that stuff. So one afternoon, I was just hanging around. It was, I think, the day before that I was going to go back home to Atlanta, and he asked me to just come in and jam with the band. So we, you know, that was the first time that I actually played with him when he was actually playing with him and his band. We jammed for like maybe an hour one afternoon, and the next day I flew home to Atlanta, and basically it was just like, okay, well, I'll see what happens next. You know, there were no promises. I get paid for the sessions, and it was like, okay, cool, and it was like whatever happens next is going to happen, and if it happens, then I'll take it as it comes. But there was no guarantee of any continued involvement other than that. I think later that year, in I think around October, he and the band were in production rehearsals because they were just ready. They were going to hit the road with the Purple Rain tour in a few weeks. And I came up for about a week or so in October, and we ended up doing one more song. It was the other instrumental on the Family album, the one that was called Yes. And we did that. And then I went back home to Atlanta and waited to see what happens next. So,
just curious, back to Yes, did you guys cut that live, or did he already have that done when you came and worked on it?
He had the track. He had the track done for that. In fact, that was the first occasion. Well, no, actually, Feline, he did. He basically had the track, and he just left the track with me, and he left and he said, "Do whatever you want with it. It's yours. Just what it is." So everything that was on, all the horns, all the melody line, the arrangement was mine on that. Now the song was actually highly edited because the original track was almost seven minutes long. Mm-hmm. The version as it appeared on the album was edited down to, I think, like maybe 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes, or something like that. So.
Wow, that's what's that's a cool track.
Yeah. I mean, it was a cool track. He had all the gizmos going on the guitars and keyboards on that.
Yes, sir. All right. Wow. So you say the band, the Revolution, was gearing up for the tour. Now, I'm on the outsider, so I'm gonna give you my side, and you can jump in with the details. I just remember looking at Purple Rain. Was it Purple Rain Tour Live, Syracuse home video concert? And certain point you come in playing, I believe, and Eddie M was up there, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. What he would do, Sheila and her band, which Eddie M was a member of Sheila's band. They were the opening act on the Purple Rain tour, and I was. I was, like I said, I was still living in Atlanta. I believe that tour started in Detroit, and their next stop was Greensboro, North Carolina. They were in Greensboro for several nights, and I was going to be driving from Atlanta down to Florida, where my parents lived. It was right before Thanksgiving of 1984, and so I detoured and stopped in Greensboro just to check out the show because I had never seen Prince perform live. And Alan said, "Yeah, come out and check out the show." So I did, and Prince, once Prince knew I was there, he asked me. He said, "Come on up and sit in with us." And I said, "Well, on what? I mean, and I don't know any of this music." And he said, "No." I said, "It's just on the encore we do 'Baby I'm a Star,' and the routine is that he would routinely bring members of Sheila's band, including Eddie M, and Sheila would come out on 'Baby I'm a Star.' And, Sheila would be playing timbales or whatever. So once they, kind of got through the song, then Prince would vamp on the song for maybe 5-10 minutes. Mm-hmm. So he asked me to come up and just play and just solo on the out vamp of 'Baby I'm a Star.' So I did that a couple nights, and then I went home, and then a few months later, I came out to L.A., and he then asked me to stay out on the tour for the remaining the couple months that were left on the rest of the tour. And then he started bringing me up on more songs. On 'Baby I'm a Star,' he brought me up on a couple things in the middle. And so by the time they did that the concert in Syracuse, by then I had been out on the tour for a while, just coming up and playing a solo on a couple songs during the show by then. So.
Wow. that was a monumental tour, man. I mean, like I got a chance to see that myself, and that went all over the place, the United States.
Yeah.
You guys shut it down. And again, this is, I got to give you the outsider's point. So other than seeing things on MTV, there was no internet. So a lot of the stuff that's going on, I have no clue what's going on behind the scenes. So one of the first things I remember, Around the World in a Day comes out, Raspberry Beret video. And then I think the next sort of thing that I remember seeing was the MTV interview, live out there from Paris. You guys were recording, where they were recording the movie.
Yeah, it was actually in Nice.
Nice.
But yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that America performance for a lot of us was the first glimpse that, this band has grown, and there's sort of a changing, the sound is sort of kind of going in a different direction. And it was some badass shit, man. It was like, I think your partner, Mr. Bliss, was.
Well, on that video was me and Eddie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Eddie. Okay, got it. But that was such a dramatic change in the style to me a little bit. It was like, I was like, whoa, the horns is really going in, and the rhythm guitar. I don't know if Miko was in the band playing at that.
No, he wasn't there yet.
Okay.
No,
But talk to me a little bit about how's the band transitioning at this point? Was it different?
Well,
from
what happened? We came off the road this was now spring of '85. The Purple Rain. We finished the Purple Rain tour, and basically my next thing was that we were going to go into rehearsals that summer because the Family album was finished and was actually finally going to be released. So the Family album came out in summer of '85, and we had a top 10 hit with song "Springs of Passion." Mm-hmm. So the plan is that the Family. The group, the Family, as far as what the group was Paul Peterson, Susanna Melvoin, myself, Jelly Bean Johnson, and Jerome Benton. Now, we had to put together a band. We had to find bass player, guitar players, keyboard players, and that's what Miko came into the Family. He was going to be the guitar player in the Family.
Oh, okay.
Susanna and Wendy's brother, Jonathan, who, of course, tragically passed away in the mid-'90s, he was one of the keyboard players in the band with the Family. So we were rehearsing that summer for, ostensibly, the plan was that there was going to be a tour in the fall of '85. It was going to be Sheila as the headliner, Sheila and her band as the headliner, the Family, and the group Maserati, which was that group that Mark Brown had produced, and they had that one album. And the Family, we did one gig at First Avenue, at the First Avenue Club here, and then shortly after that, Paul decided to leave the group and pursue other things. So the Family project fell apart at that time. Now, in the meantime, I had already started doing some recording with Prince for his own music.
Okay.
So the question was, if I'm now doing recording for his own music, at what point in time was he going to maybe then ask me to become a member of his band? Nothing had been really stated about that, because basically the Family was still an entity at that point. But after Paul quit the band, and it was around that time that he was in Nice, because he was filming the movie Under the Cherry Moon. So that's when we all came over to Nice, and then he decided to do this video of America, and he decided at that point that he wanted to use me and Eddie M on that. So we were in the rehearsals for that the night before, and basically there was going to be solo spots and some of the little horn riffs that he came up for us to do, and then said, okay, here's where it's going to be. Eric is going to solo here, Eddie's going to solo here. But in the middle of it, I told Prince, I said, I've got an idea for a more extended horn line that might work at certain parts of the song. so he said, okay, what is it? And I played it for him, and he said, yeah, that's cool. So teach it to Eddie, which I did, and that's kind of the crazy horn line that kind of just is played over and over again, as you know, through in between the solos. It's just a crazy ass horn line, So yeah, so that was my little contribution to that. But yeah, it certainly, for people who were used to a particular, the most distinctive thing about Prince's sound and about his band and his music before that really was his use of keyboards. I think more than anything else. So now, obviously, he's bringing in instruments that for the first 5-6 years of his music he had never used before. So by definition, that certainly was going to be something very different for the Prince fans. It's like, so what the hell are these guys playing, and what are they doing?
Oh, it was dope, man. I mean, it was like badass. It was like, oh. I wanted to go back to the family because I'm glad you brought that up, and I know. You guys with F Deluxe, and we'll talk about that, but that original lineup that you talked about in the album, and the album was, in my opinion, was fabulous. One of Prince's greater protege type albums, if you want to call it. I mean, the album was dope.
Well, it could have been a Prince album. I mean, I love Paul and Suzanne and everything, and their vocals on it are really certainly set it apart from what it is. But it's like, as I said, I heard all of that music when I was putting my parts on it with Prince's vocals on it. Mm. So it could have been a Prince. It could have been a great Prince album.
So when Rick. I'm going to say Rick, when St. Paul leaves to go be a rich man, which right, I dug that album too. But how did the group feel when he left? Did you guys? I mean, did you understand it, or at the time?
Well, I'm sure our first reaction was that, okay, we didn't see this coming, And obviously it was like, okay, well, that's the end of this project. So whatever this was going to be, it's not going to be. I had, Jerome was already in Nice because, he was the co-star with Prince and Under the Cherry Moon. So that relationship was, Jerome's relationship with Prince was certainly going to be there. I really never had a discussion with Susanna or Jelly Bean for a while after that. My initial reaction was, okay, this is a drag because this was a really cool album, and I guess we were kind of looking forward to the possibility of going out on tour and seeing what was going to happen with this. But since I had already been doing these things with Prince and his music, Alan immediately told me, he said, I wouldn't be too concerned because I have a feeling that Prince is going to immediately just put you in his band. And that's pretty much what happened. Okay. Yeah. So I was very, very, very fortunate to, have been in that situation. And it was very shortly after that, then, of course, that Prince then decided to not only just add me, but to expand, I mean, all of a sudden, one day the Revolution was 5 people, the next day it was 10 people.
Right. Well, and man, that Revolution, when you guys go on the Hit and Run tour, the original Hit and Run tour, I have a term that I use called the Headbuster. That lineup, when you guys hit the stage and started playing, it was a headbuster to the fans. The music, man, the presentation of it. You guys had the suits, everybody, the hair was cut. Prince was on a whole different sort of, it was like a different character at that time. He was smiling. You could really see everything. And he didn't really even play that much. He was more band leader.
On that tour, I mean, here's a guy who's known as an iconic guitar player. On that whole tour, the only song he would routinely ever play guitar on was either Purple Rain, and we didn't do Purple Rain every night on that show, on that tour. We did it some nights, but some nights we didn't do Purple Rain. And occasionally on an encore, we would come out and we would play A Whole Lot of Shaking Going On, the old Jerry Lee Lewis song.
Yes.
And occasionally he might pick up a guitar just to play some rock guitar, but other than that, he did not play guitar on that show at all.
Wow.
Yeah, it was that. If there was one thing that was kind of like, oh my God, he didn't play guitar on this show. Yeah, it was kind of odd. I mean, now his rig was always up there, you know. So I mean, obviously, at any given time, if he wanted to pick up the guitar, he was more than welcome to do that, you know. But yeah, I laughed. Alan and I, we called that the anti-tour. And that was a throwback to George Clinton. After George Clinton had done all his theatrical tours, like the Mothership tour with all the with the Mothership coming down and all the all the theatrical production, George did a tour in support of One Nation Under a Groove when that song came out. That was just stripped down, no theatrics. The band went out on stage and they were all wearing army fatigues, and it was called the Anti-Tour. Wow. No, it was like, no, we did the big theatrical production. Now we're just going to come out and play, and it was the Anti-Tour, and that's what I called the Hit and Run Tour, because there was no theatrics. It was just a band on a bare stage, coming out and playing music.
Yes, and it was incredible. Like I wanted to ask you, the horn. So I'm trying to remember some of the things that really kind of blew me away. I remember the song like another.
First of all, let me say that
Sure.
that Prince came to me as soon as he decided to expand the band, and the first thing he came to me, he said, I want to add a trumpet.
Okay.
And he said, do you know someone? I said, oh, and I absolutely. Matt Bliston, who was known as Atlanta Bliss, that was the nickname that Prince. Matt was actually from Pittsburgh. We were living together. I was living with Matt and his wife in Atlanta because they had moved to Atlanta before I did. But Matt and I went to music school together in Pittsburgh. So I had played in bands with Matt for over 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Before we started working with Prince. So Matt and I we had been a section, for years and years before, we'd ever heard the name Prince. So Matt was obviously my go-to guy. I said, no, I know exactly the guy that's going to be perfect for this. And Matt was. I mean, Matt is, he kept me honest. Matt was so good that Matt made me sound so good.
Is that right?
I sounded good because Matt was so good, So, and anyway, I just got to put that out there.
Shout out to Matt. I actually talked to him a few months ago.
That section, because first of all, he's the lead voice in the section. Just by nature, the trumpet is the higher pitched instrument than a tenor or baritone. So, I mean, his sound is what really helps define what the sound of that horn section was.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So that's interesting. So you guys already have a chemistry. You already have a trust between the two of you that you can come into this together.
Yeah. We knew, I mean, Prince could throw something at us and Matt and I could instantly just interpret and say, okay, we know what to do this. Done. Okay. Ready. Let's go. Yeah.
But a particular song I wanted to ask about this period, Another Lover Hole in Your Head. On the album version, that sort of middle part bridge thing where you guys do on the horn is not on there, but on that 12-inch.
There are no horns. Yeah, the 12-inch we added it later. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Who came up with that?
Well, that was my line. It was when that section comes up in the song. When we were in rehearsals, Prince just said to me, "When we get to this point, Eric, just it's an 8 or 9 bar phrase or whatever in the middle of the song. He says, Eric, just play a solo there." And I went home after the rehearsal, and I thought, I got a lot of solos, and I thought maybe I'd write something that would be a little different rather than me just coming out and playing a solo there every night. So I came up with that line and brought it in the next day and showed it to Matt, and that was a little, it wasn't that difficult a line for a sax. For a trumpet, that was a very difficult line. But Matt nailed it. I mean, and Matt's a really good sight reader. So I mean, I'd written it out and gave it to Matt the next morning before, before Prince got there for rehearsal. We would usually get there 10, 15, half hour before rehearsal would start, just to warm up our horns or whatever. And I said, I got a part here that we got to look at before the rest of the band gets here. And it took Matt about 5 or 10 minutes to get that under his fingers, and once he did, he had it nailed. So when Prince came in that day, I said to Prince, at that part where on Another Lover where you wanted me to play a solo, I said I wrote something for it, so check it out and tell me if it's cool. So and he obviously he dug it, so that's what we did there, and instead of just like another tenor solo.
Yeah, that is a cold part. I remember hearing that. It's on that the video from the Detroit show.
From the Detroit gig, yeah.
And I saw that. I was like, what?
Now I got to tell you that of all of the tours that I did with Prince, the Sign of the Times tour, Lovesexy Tour, my favorite 4 or 5 minutes of any show was at the end of that when Lisa would come down and sit at the piano. Prince would go off stage. Now, unfortunately, on the Detroit gig that everyone has seen, that's edited. Because that piano solo that Lisa's playing actually went on for about 3 or 4 minutes, sometimes even 5 minutes. Prince would leave the stage, he was changing clothes, and Lisa would come down and play that solo. Now, I had another set of horn lines that I had written to accompany Lisa behind her solo, but that solo of Lisa's, to me, there was nothing that I look forward to every night more than that solo, because I absolutely love the way Lisa plays. And her distinctive harmonic flavor that she brought to the music that when she was there was so personified in what she played. And for anybody that might get a chance to have ever heard a recording of that show unedited, that was my favorite part. I just said, man, every night I would look forward to Lisa coming down and playing piano at the end of that. That was my favorite part of the show.
Nice. That particular tour would unfortunately be the last tour with the Revolution.
Right. Yeah.
From your standpoint, obviously you went on to stay with Prince and do amazing stuff, but at that particular point, like, what did you think of the transitioning of the Revolution to the Sign of Times band, where you're bringing in, I guess, more of Sheila's players and things? But why do you think that? I mean, aside from personal relationships with Susanna, whatever, but in terms of the musician side of it, what did you think?
I mean, first of all, you have to remember one thing: nothing is forever. So I was disappointed, and I kind of hesitate to say this because I don't mean to cast any aspersions on any of the players that weren't in the band after that.
Sure.
Wendy and Lisa had a musical relationship with Prince that went very deep, for a lot of different reasons. But there was a particular flavor that they brought to Prince's music during that period of time that just personally I happen to have really loved. Particularly a harmonic texture that they brought. And they really, the relationship that they had with Prince, they opened up Prince to a lot of different kinds of influences and things to check out. And Prince was in a frame of mind at that point to really be open to a lot of the different things that they were bringing to him and some of the things that I was bringing to him or whatever. So to be flat out honest, just personally, I never enjoyed the band as much after Wendy and Lisa were no longer there.
Really?
Now, the bands were great, the music shows were terrific, and the band was killer. But there was a certain component of the music that they brought. So I was very disappointed by their departure. Certainly I was disappointed because of the relationship I had with Mark and with Bobby also. Now, bringing Sheila into the band, that's something that I think was inevitable, because we had already been doing a lot of recording sessions and a lot of jam sessions in the studio with Sheila for over a year. And I just kind of thought back to, I said, boy, sooner or later, I just think that he's going to create some kind of a role for Sheila in his music. And I thought, well, maybe he would ask her to maybe just come in and be a percussionist just maybe play congas and timbales or something. So it wasn't a surprise to me, and I don't think it was a surprise to anybody when he finally brought her in, as the drummer. And a lot of it is just that, the main thing to remember is that Prince is a musical artist. And it really, we can all sit and pat ourselves on the back and say, oh, the significance of what I brought to his music or what anybody else. But, it doesn't matter how much or how good we were in his music or how good or how important we thought we were. There's going to come a time when Prince is going to say, Eric is really cool. I really enjoy what he brought to my music. But, there are other people out there that I can have in my band that are going to bring me something different. Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't he take advantage of that? For Prince, it's a buyer's market. He could sit there and put out a casting call, and hundreds of extremely talented and capable musicians are going to line up wanting to be a part of his thing. Mm-hmm. So why shouldn't he take advantage of that? After I left the band, he had a horn section come in years later with Michael Nelson on trombone leading the band that was, referred to as the Hornheads. Mm-hmm. Those guys played their asses off. I was lucky to be there first,
Wow.
Because if they had been there first, why would he needed me? I mean, they could give him things that were going to be different from what I could give him. And in the early 90s, after I was no longer in his band, but by then was doing my own albums for Paisley Park, he would still bring me in from time to time to do recording sessions for him. But at the same time, he might bring in the Hornheads to do a recording session. Mm-hmm. So here he had the option and the luxury to be able to sit back and say, well, here's a song that I really want Michael Nelson to do an arrangement because this is the kind of song that he's really going to give me what I want. Because Eric isn't going to give me what I'm hearing for on this song. But now here's another song that's kind of up Eric's alley, that's in his wheelhouse, so I want to hear what he's going to do with this song. So why shouldn't he take advantage of that?
Sure.
He's Prince, So those kind of changes in the band, that's a very natural progression for somebody like him. So basically, from my perspective, okay, we got new people here, let's roll. My job is still the same. My job is still come to work and give him what he wants. So on the other hand, I'm just saying, okay, I survived this cut.
Hilarious.
So.
You mentioned, so I think during this period too, or leading up to this, and you talk about these jam sessions. Can you talk a little bit about? I don't know if this was the actual term that you guys called it, but the flesh type, the sessions that you guys are playing.
Sure. Yeah. They all happened in a period of like 1 week out in L.A. I'll tell you where they happened. They happened.
Eric brought receipts.
I was in Florida with my parents for the Christmas holiday, and the day after Christmas, this was Christmas in 1985. Alan called me and said he wants you out in L.A. tomorrow. And I was like, oh shit! I was like, I was like one of my family in Miami for the holidays. So I said, okay, fine. Grabbed my horn, jumped on a plane, and Alan said, the good thing is he just needs you for a couple of days. Fly out there, do what he needs you to do, and then fly home. Fly back to Florida for the rest of the holidays. Well, I was out in L.A. for 3 weeks.
Wow.
But it was cool. We were in the studio almost every day doing different things. So on a series of days. Sheila was around, Levi Caesar, who had not yet, this was a good year before he was, became a member of Prince's band, but he was already a member of Sheila's band, so he was hanging around. And on any given night, Wendy or Lisa, myself, Prince, Sheila, Levi, I think Jonathan Melvoin was hanging around. Any combination of us would be in the studio, and we would just jam, just instrumental jams, and we recorded everything, and that's where these sessions came out. And I guess at some point during that he started referring to it as the flesh. And there was at one point where he actually, and this was one of the most wonderful opportunities that he gave me. At that point, we had about an hour's worth of these sessions, of just these jam sessions, and he said, Eric, I'm going to give you the studio for a few days. Mess around with this stuff. Put some overdubs on it if you want, or any of the stuff that you want to edit. Make me an album. Make me an album's worth of stuff from this, from these sessions. Now, I knew that he didn't mean that this was anything that was going to be released. You know, there was no point where any of us really considered that any of this was stuff that was going to be actually worthy of being released. But the fact that here we are in Sunset Sound Studios in L.A., and he's giving me the opportunity to have a major world-class facility at my beck and call, to be able to just spend a couple nights and screw around with this music was a wonderful compliment, an opportunity for him to give me. Just to mess around, because he was interested. Now, I wasn't the only one that he would do. He would do that with Wendy and Lisa. He would give them music and say, girls, go in and take this and just screw around with it. I want to see what you guys come up with. So it wasn't just me that he was doing that with, but the fact that he did it with this stuff was So I had a ball working on that stuff. Now I gave him a sequenced album that was going to be called The Flesh. Now I knew it was not going to be released. It was just for us, but I think he was just curious at that point to kind of, to just kind of see
what you're gonna do with it,
what I'd end up doing with it. So,
Well, you can tell he definitely had a lot of trust. He trusted your opinion or trusted your ability to say, "Hey, take my stuff or take this, and let me see what we put your thing on top of it." I mean, that's a huge thing, man.
No, it was, and yeah, it was. When the musician of Prince's caliber is basically given you the opportunity, and of course the full extension of that was several years later. After we had done the Madhouse stuff, when he said, "Okay, the hell with this Madhouse stuff. I'm just going to sign you to the label, and you got it. It's go on, do whatever you want to do." So
wow. Was there? Do you also remember a track called "You Got to Shake Something"?
Yeah, that was one of the things from those sessions.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was that. I think that was the first one that he started referring to as The Flesh. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that
that was yeah, he recut it. And he did a song on Graffiti Bridge that was called "You Got to Shake Something." It was a completely different song, but it was kind of like a different version of what. But the original track was just like a 15-minute jam, and it was Prince, Sheila, Levi, and myself.
Yeah, that man. I remember hearing that for the first time, and just like the different changes, and some you hear him talk a little bit in it. So even the comedy and just the banner between.
In the spirit of full disclosure, and don't tell anyone that I told you this, other than the people that are listening, that hopefully listen to this. Prince was drunk that night.
Hilarious.
Yes.
And that would all make sense.
Before
it all
we started,
comes together.
Now Prince did not drink much. So a little bit of wine and Prince went a long way.
Wow.
But he and Sheila, they were both tanks. Yeah. They had split a good bottle of wine before we started hitting it that night. So Prince was feeling really good.
Well, you can hear it, man. You can definitely hear it. It's funny stuff. Mm-hmm. All right. Wow. So Madhouse, Sign of the Times, again, is such a drastic shift in just even the presentation of it all. But the Sign of the Times band, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that tour, I guess that's not the anti-tour. That was a
that was back to him, presenting a major theatrical production.
Yes.
Although compared to the Lovesexy production, Sign of the Times was romper room.
Talk to us a little bit about the Sign of the Times, and I also wanted to get your opinion too, because I'm a huge fan of the rehearsals. Now again, I can only listen to them, but I've listened to so many of them, and I just love the process and everything. But from your perspective and being in the band, like, can you tell us, like, how did that process start from conception to damn near, the presentation, the final product? I mean, is there many changes that go through? Do you just start with the band before the stage and all that? How does that all work? Yeah,
that's pretty much, like I said, it's I wasn't around yet. I had seen a little bit of the production rehearsals for the Purple Rain tour, but and obviously the Hit and Run tour was just basically us putting the music together and just going out and play since there was no real production to it other than that. So the Sign of the Times, knowing that this was going to be, that he had an idea for an elaborate stage presentation and stage set and everything, so we knew this was going to be a little bit different. We saw some sketches of what the stage was going to look like, but we didn't see the stage for months after we had already, been working on the music. So basically his process was, when we initially started working on the music for what ended up being the Sign of the Times tour, we had already recorded a bunch of the songs that were going to be on the Black album.
Okay.
So we actually started rehearsing some of that stuff. Songs like Cindy C and Rebirth of the Flesh,
wow,
and some of the other things that were on the Black album. We actually started rehearsing those songs. Very quickly, that all fell by the way. That all just kind of got axed. And we started then concentrating more on the stuff that was going to be on the Sign of the Times album itself, because we actually started rehearsing that tour before the album was even released. So finally, once the album came out, we started working on the specific music for that. But we were also, there was some of the other music that Crystal Ball, some of that other stuff that didn't come out until way later. We were actually rehearsing some of that stuff. But once the Sign of the Times album had come out, that's where we started really just working on that stuff.
Can I ask you? Can I ask you a quick question? And I'm sorry, sure. You're mentioning all these jewels, and I'm just like, oh shit. So before we go into that Sign of the Times, you mentioned Crystal Ball, and like Birth of the Flesh and different things. Another recording that was probably done around this time was Girl in My Dreams, Can't Stop This Feeling I Got, Weak and Funk, that whole little sequence.
Right, that was all stuff we had actually done with the Revolution the year before.
Oh, wow.
Prince, that was all done during rehearsals for the Hit and Run tour.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and actually the idea, Prince actually had an idea that he wanted to do a musical. Actually like a Broadway musical.
Wow. Okay.
Which would have been cool. I would have loved nothing better than go and sit in New York for months and just So those songs were actually his idea for Now the thing with Prince is you had to remember, and once you were in Prince's camp, you kind of took this, you understood this, that a lot of what Prince would say and do and be excited about on Monday had nothing to do with what he was excited and what we were doing on Tuesday.
Got it.
So he could get really excited about something, and we'd go down this rabbit hole of his and follow him, in Wonderland and doing all this crazy stuff. And then a week later, it was like, well, whatever, what happened to that? And he said, oh, no, I'm past that. We're on to something else now. I said,
wow.
Okay, fine,
Wow.
So that stuff was actually done with the Revolution, during that stuff. So basically the process was that, we would start to rehearse the music, and over a period of time, and this was always some of the more interesting periods for me, was to sit back and see what he was putting together for what the tour would be, because it would be very experimental as far as the combinations of songs, different arrangements of songs. Because one cool thing about Prince is that even though a recorded version of a song, as soon as the song was recorded, that isn't necessarily how we would play it. And I always appreciated that about him, because now obviously there were a lot of songs that would be recorded that didn't have horns on the recorded version, and once we got into the performance aspect, then he would say, okay, I got the horn players up here, I might as well put them to work. So it's like, I said, well, here's a song that the horns didn't play on the recorded version, so he would come up with an arrangement for the horns, or he would ask me to come up with an arrangement, or sometimes we just sit there and we throw some ideas against the wall and see what stuck, and that would become the arrangement. So obviously, I always appreciated that aspect of it. So after, I would guess, after maybe 2.5 months of working on, you'd start to really get an idea. So okay, now we're really getting an idea of what the actual set list is going to be, what the show is going to be about. But on the Sign of the Times tour, we got the set basically down to what it was going to be, and then we went to First Avenue and performed there.
Oh, yes.
And that was the first performance that introduced the new band, with Sheila and Levi and Bonnie Boyer in it, and me and Cat Glover. And then we went back and rehearsed a little bit more, and then we went to Europe to start the tour, but we actually didn't see the stage until we got to Europe. So we actually were in Europe. We were in Birmingham, England for a week, and then we were in Stockholm, Sweden for a week doing just production rehearsals, where now we were on the actual stage. And you needed a few good weeks of just then running things down, because this is where all the lights and all of the the effects on stage had to be programmed and integrated into the show. So production rehearsals were extremely tedious and boring. We all hated production rehearsals, at least I did. Because basically what it meant is you would start at the very top of the show, and you would start playing, and then you might get 30 seconds or a minute into a song, and Prince would say, okay, everybody stop and freeze, and wherever you are, stay there. And then there's a guy named Roy Bennett, who was the production designer for all of these tours. He started, I think he did some of Prince's earlier tours. I know he did the Purple Rain tour. He did all the lights for the Hit and Run tour. He did all the lights and all of the production design for the stage. This is the guy who would actually design the stage with Prince for the Sign of the Times tour and the Lovesexy tour. So much of the theatrical and the visual aspect of Prince's tours were because of this guy, Roy Bennett. He was, and he since has become, after that, I mean, since then, he's been one of the most highly in demand production designers in entertainment. But he really got his start with Prince. But all of that stuff that you saw on stage, this was because of this guy, Roy Bennett. So the production rehearsals basically were Prince and Roy sitting down and then going into every song 30 seconds at a time, a minute at a time, and then they would stop. And then they would sit and discuss. Prince would give Roy his ideas about what he wanted to happen with the lights or whatever, and Roy would give Prince his ideas of what he could do, and they would sit and they would have to program, because all the lights were programmed, computer programmed at that point. So they would have to then sit and program. So that might be 5 or 10 minutes while they're sitting commiserating on that, and we just got to sit on stage and just sit there. And then Prince would say, okay, pick it up exactly where we left off.
Wow.
So it's like, it's like if you had a tape, you'd hit stop or pause, and then you'd hit play to pick it up. So we'd pick it up, and we'd maybe get another 2 minutes into the song, and Prince would yell, stop! And then, and this is what we would do day after day for like 2 or 3 weeks, because it would take that long to get everything together. And that's what production rehearsals were. I hated them. I hate. Now, to be honest, I'm sure Prince didn't really like them that much either, because they were just tedious and they were boring. But this is the process that you had to go through. This is why the shows looked how they did. And I mean, to be absolutely honest with you, when we did the Lovesexy tour, I was so bored with that show before we played the first performance, because we rehearsed and put that show together for almost 4.5 months before we played the first gig.
Wow.
And the production rehearsals on that tour were a nightmare, because we had some unforeseen technical difficulties with lights and sound and everything that had to be addressed before we could even play the first show. So there was an awful lot of tension that was going on during the production rehearsals on that. Fortunately, everything came together, and the first show went off without a hitch. But I got to be honest with you. I slept-walked through that entire show, that tour. I can't tell you anything about about anything that I felt other than, okay, here's another gig we're doing tonight. Boy, this is just the same thing we did last night.
Wow.
And the funny thing is that after that tour was over, years and years later, I think in the mid-'90s, I was in Japan with a band with Sheila E. that we had for a while called the E-Train, which was hands down one of the greatest bands and hippest gigs that I ever had. It was one of my favorite gigs that I ever did. And I was in Japan and was in a record store, and I came across a bootleg video of the Lovesexy Tour, because there had been a live broadcast of the tour from Germany that was broadcast on European TV. And I had never seen it. So I really had no real understanding of what even the Lovesexy show looked like, because I was just on stage. I never got a chance to see it. I never saw a video. So anyway, and it was a bootleg video, in a record store in Japan. So I said, oh, wow. So I bought it, Now, and I took it home thinking that, I said, I'll be surprised if the video quality is any good at all. I was expecting it to be like, a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy that, So I got it home and I threw it in my VHS player and was really pleasantly surprised that the video quality was superb. It was like I had recorded it off the TV myself.
Right.
So I said, oh, cool, this is great. It's a really good, but I didn't watch it. For whatever reason, I just checked it. I said, cool, I'll check it out later, and I put it away.
Wow.
I didn't watch it. I didn't end up watching it for like another 10 years. And a friend of mine, a guy that was a friend of mine who was a fan of some of Prince's music, was visiting me in Minneapolis one weekend. And we were talking, and he mentioned that, he had never gotten a chance to see the Lovesexy show. And I said, oh, well, something, I happen to have a video of it. So, we were having dinner or whatever. I said, after dinner, we'll go back to my place. I'll dig it out. I got it somewhere. I'll throw it in. We'll watch a little bit of it, get a chance to see what that show is about. I figured we'd watch maybe 5 or 10 minutes of it. Well, we ended up watching most of it. And I was absolutely fascinated by it. Because, first of all, I didn't remember much about it. A lot of it was like I was watching it for the first time, and I tell you what, the band was on fire. I mean, the band was just smoking. I mean, it was just, oh my God! And I'm sitting there, I'm looking at this like I was never even a part of it, and I said, wow, I don't remember ever feeling that while we were actually doing it. It was just odd. So and that was just a factor. But by the same token, the only way you could have presented a show like the Sign of the Times tour or the Lovesexy tour is to basically have rehearsed it enough that you could basically go up there and do it in your sleep.
Right.
You really had to just be able to do it backwards and forwards.
Man, that Lovesexy thing that you talked about, if I'm not mistaken, that was actually officially released overseas at that time, because I remember seeing ads for it in some import magazines, pissed because I was in America. Of course, there was no way I could get it. But one of the favorite parts about that to me, that piano melody thing that Prince does on the second half, and at the end of that, you guys go into When Two Are in Love, and then you come out and you start playing, and I think you go into the Madhouse song 3. But was that sometimes you may have, I don't know if you did, but that was one of my favorite parts, because just the way you're playing it, it's just you up there by yourself, and Prince is kind of walking out, and he's got the spotlight.
Actually, the piano was descending below the stage at that point. That riser.
That was a dope moment, man. I was like, that's Eric, man, doing, and it was good to hear that song, because I was like a fan of Madhouse. I was like, oh, they doing that. I was like,
well, thank you, man. I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, those were the interesting. That's when I watched the show. That's the stuff that really fascinated me, because the transitions that he would come up with, to connect certain songs together. That was some of the most interesting stuff for me that he would ever come up with. Because one song would just, was like the whole show was like one big piece. Just one song just would meld into another, and he would come up with these really cool little ideas to get from one thing to. Those are the things that I really, those are the things in the rehearsals that I really enjoyed, is where you could sit back and just watch his creativity come out like that. The thing is, now part when I say that I was bored with the show, that part of that is a function of the fact of my basic perspective on music is from the standpoint of being a jazz player. So I want to play the music different every night.
I got
you know. So I appreciate what the statement is, and you know, and the Lovesexy show did evolve over a period of time. I'm sure that if I heard the very last performance of that show, which was like 6 months after the first, I'm sure there were a lot of little things that changed over a period of time. But for example, the Hit and Run tour was the most enjoyable one for me because, first of all, there were no theatrics. It was just the band coming out and playing. And the fact is that there was a lot of alternates on the Hit and Run tour. And there were a lot of, we had a basic set list, but there was alternate stuff that would go on during the gig that Prince wouldn't even call until we were, at football, what do they say? They call an audible. Right? Mm-hmm. Prince was calling audibles all through the Hit and Run tour. Like, for example, there was a point in the show every night on that gig where we would either play Mutiny or we would play Love Bazaar. And it was either going to be one or the other. And Prince would never decide which one he wanted to do until right before. Now, the way it was set up, whatever song that we came out of before that, Wendy would always count off the song for us. And she would, if she counted off saying 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, if we knew it was numbers, it was going to be Mutiny. But if she counted it off saying A, B, A, then we knew it was going to be Love Bazaar. So that was, now what Prince would do is right before that, he would lean over to Wendy and say either Mutiny or Love Bazaar. So that was her cue. But the rest of the band didn't know what it was going to be until she counted it off. That was our cue. And other songs that we did were more wide open because that gig was more a little heavily on the more open-ended funk and R&B stuff. So he would open up a lot of the songs. Like, we were doing Head on that show. Well, on any given night, maybe that would be 3 or 4 minutes long. Some nights it would be 10 minutes long. And then any given show, he might just throw another solo to me or to whomever or to Matt Liston or whatever. So, it was much more of an open-ended thing. So those are the things that I appreciated because we really didn't know exactly what the show necessarily was going to be every given night. Whereas a theatrical performance, by definition, has to be pretty much what it is because you've got all of the stage effects and all of the lights that have to be so completely coordinated with it. So you don't have the luxury of being able in the middle of a song for Prince to say, okay, I'm going to do something else. Right. Because all of a sudden the computerized lights and everything are like, all of a sudden, well, this doesn't make any sense any longer. Wow. So, those were absolutely brilliantly presented shows. And the most important thing is, forget about what I think. I didn't like the Sign of the Times tour because of the stage. Now, the stage looked brilliant, and it was everything but. I happen to have a fear of heights.
Okay.
And if you look at the stage, where me and Bliston were on a very high platform at the back of the stage. Now, it wasn't as if I really knew, really felt that I was going to fall off. But when you have a fear of heights, it's the perception of things. And I never felt comfortable physically on that stage. It has nothing to do with the music. It's just that I always just felt uncomfortable. So, that's something that's, isn't necessarily, anyone's necessarily going to think about. He said, yeah, Eric's up there, he's kicking ass, he's in a great band. I said, yeah, it's a great band, we're playing great music. But I'm up there thinking, oh, shit, I don't like being up here.
You're up here terrified.
Yeah. So, so what the hell? I got a job to do, so.